Why this Navy SEAL fears China. How China's leaders plan to live forever. And President Trump's defense of Chinese Muslims. That and more on this week's China Uncensored. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This week's China News headlines. Navy SEALs are some of the toughest guys in the world, and retired Admiral William McRaven is probably one of the top. He oversaw the raid that got Osama bin Laden in 2011. So, when something scares Admiral McRaven, you should be terrified. Well, at a Council on Foreign Relations meeting this week, McRaven said China and the Chinese Communist Party's military is catching up and in some cases surpassing the U.S. It's what he called a holy something. I'm not sure what, since someone seems to have lost part of the word. But it's a serious moment for the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party is closing the gap with the U.S. on the technological battlefront. According to a new report by the Council on Foreign Relations, even though China is not a match for the U.S. across the board, China could soon rival the U.S. in fields like AI, robotics, 5G, and possibly biotechnology. Biotechnology? I think I know where this is headed. When they say president for life, they mean it. And in that vein, an ad for Beijing's 301st Hospital, the top-rated hospital in China where all the communist leaders go, say they're working on a health project that will help leaders live to 150. The ad, which was taken down after a public backlash in China, bragged about organ function regeneration. It's a new technology where they give healthy organs to rich people by taking them from Chinese dissidents who don't need them anymore. Donald Trump, defender of the world's Muslims. Yeah, that's not a mistake. The Trump administration is planning to confront China at a UN meeting next week over the Communist Party's persecution of the mostly Muslim Uighur ethnic minority. Okay, so Trump himself won't be doing it, but definitely the people he's appointed will. And this won't be new for the Trump administration. Vice President Mike Pence has specifically called out the internment camps in China where more than 1 million Chinese Muslims endure around-the-clock brainwashing. And yet, no matter how much Chinese authorities try to whitewash the issue, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the persecution of Uyghurs is the stain of the century, as opposed to the stain of last century, which involved Bill Clinton getting China into the WTO. Getting the UN to move against China's wishes is not easy. China holds a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. That gives it tremendous potential veto power. This week, however, the UN overcame that veto threat to renew a UN political mission in Afghanistan. China was upset there was no mention of the Belt and Road Initiative. That's China's giant global infrastructure investment plan that basically gives China tremendous political influence over whichever country it invests in. And for the past 3 years, the UN Afghanistan mission basically sang the praises of the Belt and Road. Coincidentally, that also coincides with China expanding its footprint in Afghanistan. Officially, the relationship is for mineral and energy exploration, but also there's military cooperation. So no wonder other UN Council members wanted to take the Belt and Road out of the UN's political mission in Afghanistan. A speech last week from a U.S. State Department official called out Chinese tech giants for being de facto tools of the Chinese Communist Party. Christopher Ford, the Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation, said the Chinese technology giants are not purely private actors, but instead function as at least de facto tools of the Chinese Communist Party when it matters most. He specifically mentioned Baidu, Alibaba, Huawei, ZTE, and Tencent. The Chinese Communist Party has created new laws to aid what they call civil-military fusion. That basically forces even privately owned Chinese companies to cooperate with the government and party. Firms such as Huawei, Tencent, ZTE, Alibaba, and Baidu have no meaningful ability to tell the Chinese Communist Party no if officials decide to ask for their assistance. So much for no means no. Huawei is also running into more and more problems as countries around the world begin full or partial bans on Huawei equipment, usually over national security concerns. The latest country is Estonia, located right there. Sure, there. Estonia is restricting government use of Huawei over national security concerns. A Chinese couple has been accused of stealing trade secrets from a U.S. children's hospital. Authorities say the couple set up their own company in China, using stolen treatments for things like child liver cancer. Nothing like profiting off the misery of children, just like mall Santas. Bad news for Taiwan. China has managed to poach yet another one of the few remaining countries that recognize the island nation, the Solomon Islands. Now, there are only 16 countries left that still have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Now, the U.S. is reconsidering aid to Solomon Islands. And according to Reuters, Mike Pence has called off a meeting with the country's prime minister. Not that the U.S. officially recognizes Taiwan either, but the U.S. does sell weapons to Taiwan. Lots of weapons. And at the end of the day, isn't that the truest form of recognition? Behold, the Lotus Tower, the tallest building in Sri Lanka. Truly a magnificent sight. Also magnificent, how the Chinese state-owned contractor that built it managed to steal $11 million of Sri Lankan state money through graft. That's at least according to the current Sri Lankan president. He blames the previous president who was in power when the theft allegedly occurred. Of course, that previous president called the accusation a horrendous insult to China. Yeah, how dare people ask where the money went? And if you're wondering, didn't the Communist Party ever learn that stealing was wrong? Well, obviously the answer is no. But now we know why. According to Fox News, the Communist Party has been replacing the 10 Commandments with quotes from Chinese leader Xi Jinping. It's no longer just the good book, it's the party-mandated book. And that's it for this week's China News Headlines. And now it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored by contributing $1 or more through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Large, though, asks, how do you pronounce Chinese names and places? Do you use some guide, and if so, why? Good question. In the 1950s, the Chinese government made a push to have a single official Romanized system for Chinese characters. There have been several Romanized systems of Chinese over the centuries, but the Communist Party revised a specific one called Pinyin. That's why the name Peking was officially changed to Beijing in English, even though the Chinese pronunciation didn't change. Pinyin is what most people use these days to pronounce Chinese names and places. It makes it easier, but it's still not easy. Thanks for your question. And if you have a question for me you want to hear answered on the show, sign up to join the China Uncensored 50-cent army by supporting the show with $1 or more per episode. Again, YouTube is demonetizing us so much we would have to shut down the show if it weren't for your support. And to everyone, thanks for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.